So, John Carpenter, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you
Good to
for
be here.
appearing on The Art of Money Saving. And the first thing I'm going to say for all of the listeners here is to listen out for John's silky smooth baritone speaking voice.
Oh boy, pressure is on, Josh.
I always admired that about you, is you're very much speaking in your chest voice, and then I speak and I'm very much, oh hi John, how are you?
See, I think the opposite. I always admire how you speak, and I listen to myself on playback and think, he's just a mumbling fool. And that a lot of times, like in school, that was a problem for me, is because basically in order to get the sound out, well, in order to talk properly, I had to
Yeah.
use a lot of sound, and so I could never whisper or pass notes in school or anything like that. And so I got a super tight jaw and was always clenched. I remember when we were in Munich, that was a big problem with some of the foreign members, non-native English speakers in the studio. They just couldn't understand me. And I remember one Italian girl saying to me after 1 year, "My dear, for the first day in 1 year, I understand you." It taken one year to understand this American over here.
That's amazing, absolutely amazing. So we got to know each other when we both lived in Munich, but tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, well, my name's John Carpenter, and I'm a professional opera singer, and I have been since 2014. Normally, I'm living and working in Germany. Like you said, we met in the opera studio in Munich, and after that, I went to Berlin at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, and now I'm an ensemble member in Freiburg, which is in the Black Forest, kind of near the French-Swiss border. I'm American from Philadelphia. I'm in New Jersey right now, so when I have the free time to come back and hang out with the family, I do. But most of the time, I'm in Germany working and singing full time. And importantly, because today is March 1st, I'm also one of the co-founders of a new company called Maestro Artists, which hopefully we'll get to talking about in a little while. But yeah, check it out.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely going to grill you a little bit more about Maestro Artists, and it's great that we can have this conversation on day one of the launch. I got in there straight away.
Day one.
And day one. It's always important to say, of course, the podcast is designed for creative people, but although we're both opera singers, if people are tuning in and they don't know anything about opera, that's absolutely fine, because we'll be talking about investing and starting your own business, lots of those things. So it's open for everyone. So what led you to Germany? Why did you make that change from going from the States to Europe?
Well, I didn't know I wanted to be a singer to start. I studied piano since I was 4 or 5 years old, and I went to a regular university. I went to Penn State University, not a music school, but I went there on a piano scholarship. And we had to take 2 instruments, and I thought singing would be the easiest one to take because I heard that they didn't have to practice too much, and so I could spend more time playing the piano and less time trying to figure out how to, I don't know, play the oboe or something like that. So started singing, and I was taking a half-hour lesson with a grad student, and I just absolutely loved it and kind of fell in love with it. But I got really upset because she was leaving. She was a graduate student, and she was headed, to make her own career and try things. So she said there was a guy living in State College in the middle of Pennsylvania, Amish country, who had a career in Germany and was a retired opera singer, and that I should give him a call and kind of see what the deal is there. And so I went and took a lesson with him, and we really, we just hit it off. And I took lessons privately with him and managed to avoid having to go transfer schools, try to get into Juilliard or Curtis or Indiana, and I was just able to take private voice lessons for those 4 years. I graduated with a piano
Wow.
degree, and that was kind of the way there. And
Because those
then,
costs, well, American schools are crazy costs, aren't they, for places like Juilliard and the Academy of Vocal Arts? I mean, you're talking big time with the fees there, aren't you?
yeah, and I'm from Philly, so AVA is right here, and I can't tell you how many friends I have who just spent an exorbitant amount on their education, and I felt really lucky that I was able to get a well-rounded education. Piano helped me greatly, but I was able to take classes in religion, in Shakespeare, math, even though I wasn't good at it, basic science, all of these things, and to live with people who weren't musicians. It's an engineering school, so my best friend is a biostatistician and an engineer. So I thought that was a great, well-rounded
Mm.
education, and I was able to do what was necessary, which was just focus on singing. It's who your teacher is, and learning to sing. And he recommended then that we just go to New York and ring up one of his old friends, who happens to be an agent now. But she said, if you can avoid going to a master's program, if you can avoid that and just kind of start working, try that. So I auditioned for the Opera Foundation, and they accepted me in Munich to join the opera studio there. And I was able to forego a master's or a doctorate and the costs that come with it. So I got pretty lucky.
Wow. So you saved a lot of chunk of change there.
I think so.
That's
I
pretty
think so.
wise, I gotta say.
There were some growing pains, because I felt like people in Munich had some real preparation, maybe that I didn't. Stage experience from being in music schools, and
Sure.
just basic rep knowledge, language knowledge. I was pretty much a raw product. It required some polishing and it had some growing pains that came with it, but it managed to work. So
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good lesson for anyone, because I think when you leave school and you go into industry, even with that training, there's inevitably a transition that happens, and that can be quite uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of people, and a little bit scary. But it's great to know that actually you went in and you just adapted, and you do adapt. I mean, you get over it, and it just happens, and you learn a lot by jumping in at the deep end. And I mean, I went through masters and all that kind of stuff, and it was still a learning curve in that place. You were constantly adapting and learning new things. So I'm sure everyone can relate to that in some shape or form. So drawing it back now to the money.
all
What
about the money.
is all about the money? What was the first thing that kind of struck you about the differences in how things work in Germany from the States?
I think I think there's more in Germany. Well, tying it into singers too, there's more security. There's a little less risk.
Yeah.
So I have an ensemble position. So right now, even though I'm not singing because of COVID, I still have a paycheck. I still have health insurance, all of these things. But unlike a freelancer, I don't have the freedom to go for those maybe higher paying gigs, or have more artistic choice of a say kind of in what I do. I'm kind of at the will of the theater, which is really nice when you're starting out, I
Yeah.
think, because you can build repertoire and you have security and you can try new things and also mix it in with some
Yeah.
freelancing. But sort of the mentality, I think, at least as an American living in Germany, is that there's an expectation that the government will help you if you're in trouble, that your
Mhm.
employer will help you, and that there's not really a need to try to gain financial independence because the safety net is so big, encompasses everyone, and is supposedly always going to be there. I don't know if that's the case, but that's kind of the perception, is that it's going to be there. Whereas I kind of feel like in the United States, at least the way I grew up was, um, there was an encouragement to take bigger risks and to kind of not need that assistance. And then you have the freedom to do what you want. You can travel around the world, you can buy as many houses as you want, or you can just not worry, and not feel like you have to have a job because you uh, were wise early on or got lucky early on. There are a bunch of different ways to do it, as you know. But the mentality is just kind of different.
Yeah,
Germans
100.
haven't really thought about investing in financial independence. I don't talk about it that much with them. They don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I had exactly the same experience. I mean, I didn't it when I was living in Germany and Austria. It was before I kind of discovered the fire movement. But I was investing myself. But I I haven't met anyone that invests from that kind of. So there's two things. I think, of course, there are Germans that invest, of course, but in the field that we work, those musicians, it's not something that is talked about. And then I remember we started having conversations. I was like, "Oh my gosh, John invests! Yes, this is amazing." And we've had loads of conversations since about, well, just because we our lives are somewhat similar, but going back to that idea of what they call the fest contract, a fixed contract in Germany, for us singers, that is incredibly rare. So in the States, in the UK, well, most European countries, these kind of positions are rare, but in Germany, every theater, most theaters have some kind of fixed fest system. So it's a big kind of change in the culture, isn't it?
Very much so. And I actually, one of my favorite moments was when I was on the train going from Freiburg to Nuremberg, where I was doing some guesting, fortunate enough to, and I happened to sit across from an older guy who struck up a conversation with me, and he was a German fellow, but a retired engineer who had worked and run development for a company in the States, and he like immediately wanted to talk about investing. He said, Germans don't know how to invest. They don't think about it. I wouldn't have done it if the United States and Americans hadn't taught me how to do it. And he said, and because of that, I'm retired. And guess what I'm doing right now? I'm on the way to go have a vacation with my grandkids, and I'm going to do it again next month. I'm going to take them to theme parks, resorts, hotels, and stuff. He said, no one here even thinks about that. He said, so I have to thank you and your uh, fellow patriots for teaching me how to do that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Like, what a coincidence that would just happen. Like, what a strange conversation on a train.
Yeah,
But
and
I
then
think
we
that
just hopped
that's
off and grabbed a Big Mac together. He was like, "I want to eat McDonald's in celebration of American investment," which I thought was pretty funny.
no way.
Yeah,
That's hilarious. What a great story. I mean, that's
yeah.
gonna that's gonna be on the podcast highlights of 2021. Amazing. Wow, wow, wow. So
But
I always have to say this on
go ahead.
any episode that I talk about investing. I have to say that these conversations, it's a conversation between you and I. Other people get to listen in, but I'm not financially qualified to offer financial advice. So this does not constitute as financial advice. You make your own investment decisions. I'm a random man on the internet, but I'm really interested to hear why you started investing and what the journey was, what you think the positives are, and what do why do musicians not invest their money? What's stopping them? Three questions in one. Go.
Yeah, you'll have to remind me if I get sidetracked. Well, your last one, I'll answer the last one first, which I think is kind of tying into what you were just saying about the fest contracts, is that it's really hard for us, especially the ones who kind of go from gig to gig, like in the United States and in the UK, that your income isn't stable and it isn't steady either. You're getting large sums of money often in big chunks, a few months, and that might be all you make in the whole year. And so it's really hard to think about
Yeah.
that and spread it out and and budget it. I'm not a big budgeter personally. I'm just not good at it. Um, but I think people struggle with that, and it's really tricky when you come home with a giant check, and all of a sudden in your bank account there's this ton of money, and you don't realize that you have to spend that over 12 months and appropriate some of it to your health insurance or food and rent and all this stuff, and before you know it, especially with agent fees and travel expenses, it's gone before you know it. So it can get tricky. I'm not envious of people who just
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
have the
yeah,
freelancing life in that. In terms of getting
yeah,
interested
yeah.
in investment, go on.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say that it's. I learned that from a colleague in the opera studio actually that was in Miranda, who was in Albert Herring, and I can remember her saying she's had a freelance career for a long time, and you get that big fat fee, you get that the offer from your agent, and they say we're going to pay you the inclusive fee of, and that can be quite tempting but also blinding because the reality is that's not all of your money. You've got agent costs, you've got local taxation, national insurance costs, travel, all of these deductions that need to be made. And one of the first things I do now when getting an offer is I halve it in my head, and I always underplay things.
It's
I say,
half. It's half.
yeah, yeah, and I underplay it. So if I happen to get an extra couple of €100 or whatever it is, I'm like, oh, that's good. But I really downplay it to keep those expectations reasonable. I think that's quite important.
Absolutely, yeah. It's half. It's really frustrating when you look at it, um, and you think you're getting this giant sum. It's not true. It's all a lie. And well, that's the reason why you got to do this math ahead of time. And it's the same kind of thing with investing. And if you do a little bit of basic math, even math that I can do, I think the average person will be interested in investing. The guy who taught me how to sing also taught me how to invest. His name's Graham Sanders. He's also one of the founders of Maestro Artists. So we've basically done all our ventures together. He retired as an opera singer and then became a financial advisor, and now he's done doing that, and now he's a flight instructor, just kind of a jack of all trades. But I was
Wow.
impressed
Wow.
at how a person had a singing career and yet had created some real wealth, even if they weren't necessarily constantly singing at the Met or Chicago or Covent Garden or something, kind of, maybe one step right below that, but making a steady living, had managed to create wealth enough to buy homes, not have to work, could retire, have an airplane, all of these things. And so when he told me
Wow.
about Yeah, so when he told me about how he did that, I thought that was really interesting because I'd always been focused on making money and saving money rather than creating
Hmm.
wealth, and I think the two things are really different. And I had noticed that with my parents even, as physicians, that they were really really good at making money. Um, and until they became entrepreneurs and kind of invested in an idea, in some of their inventions that they had made, medical inventions, then they were creating wealth, and that kind of inspired me. And then doing this basic math, talking to Graham and thinking about the rule of 72. You know the rule of 72, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's simple. If you what is it? It's you divide 72 by the rate of return, and that's the amount of time, the amount of years it will take to double your money. And so anyone at home can just do that and play around, play with 8% or something like that, something pretty conservative. And you can figure out how many doubling periods you have between now with what you started with, which might be a small amount, $10,000, something like that, 5,000, 1,000, whatever, and see how many doubling periods you have for your retirement. And it's astounding. And so if you start early, you can maximize the number of doubling periods you have. And so that was kind of really important that Graham taught me. Just start early.
Very cool. Very cool. I mean, it's amazing that you, because I initially thought, or maybe this kind of stuff, this idea from investing was coming through parents, because I know that they're active investors as well. But great that you had this kind of community around you of people. It's like a curiosity, isn't it? And Dave Ramsey talks about a lot. You when you see someone winning, you ask the question, how are they winning? How can I win too? And that's just such a good example of that. I absolutely love that. I was gonna. Oh, I had a really good question. I've forgotten what it was now. Damn. This happened to me a
Oh
lot.
no.
My brain fog. Damn lockdown.
I have to write everything down now. I have so many things going on. If I don't write it down immediately when I wake up in the middle of the night or something like that, then it's gone. Just
Yeah, yeah,
the notes
yeah,
on my phone are it's not organized. It's a mess, but it's the only it's the only way I can keep sane. Although
yeah.
I use my email account, my inbox as a to-do list, so that helps.
Sounds familiar. But I love the points that you illustrated. I've got it back in my head now. You, um, of of Graham. So he wasn't singing at the Met. He had a fantastic career, but sometimes I think that we associate wealth with people that are in high paid jobs. But that's the wonderful message of long term investing, is that you can earn a more modest salary, and so long as you're diligent and wise with what you have, that you can start to overtake people that are more frivolous with their cash.
Learn the technique. But yeah, for the extravagant lifestyle, yeah, I think well in Germany it's not so bad because I don't have a car and I can't drive, so and it's not really necessary. So I never got uh, trapped in that. In terms of kind of the restaurants and going out to eat a lot, that that hammered me pretty hard. That I think that would be the big expense. I'm not a
Right.
fashionable guy, so I don't really have any expensive clothing. I think it's harder for women. I would think in terms of all the concert attire they have to have and how much money they have to shill out for dresses and shoes and all this, even just to do their job. I think, and also being in Europe, that's even more enticing. But I don't
Yeah.
deny myself the finer things in life. Like I try, I don't profess to live like a monk or something like that. You know, if I want something nice, I'll get it for myself if I've earned enough money to warrant it. I think it's always important to have a little bit of, I call it, mad money. So if you sing a gig and you get a nice chunk of cash, instead of just putting it all towards investment, which I could do, um, maybe I'll get myself a set of AirPods or a new iPad or an Apple Watch or something like that, just to be like, okay, John, you worked hard. This is something to enjoy. The rest is for later. You got to have a little bit of fun, I think. How
Definitely.
about
I
you?
think that's really wise. Yeah, I mean I must say I was quite inspired by your thought process there. And I think if you have done a good job and you do have a good salary for that particular gig or whatever, then I think spending a proportion on something that you would enjoy is very important. But I think that's the difference in our situations as well, isn't it? So you are able to freelance with having the fixed contract, which I was also able to do a few years ago. But now I'm purely freelancer, so I think it, particularly with the pandemic year, it kind of really underlines why you have to prepare and why you just need that emergency fund, and it's been a real lesson, but a confirmation for me that my plan so far has worked, and it's been an effective plan.
I've been super impressed with how you've managed all this, with kind of work dropping out. I've been watching you do it and kind of how you've adjusted and been flexible on that. And you're totally right. The stability on my end is there. And I always thought that I would live off my fest contract, my ensemble gig, and basically just invest everything I got from freelancing. And I also invest some from the fest as well, but I wouldn't extend myself past that. But for someone who just does freelancing, you got to be smart. You have to plan it out better. And I think, yeah, you've
Yeah.
been an example for people on that.
Yeah, you just gotta have razor sharp focus, and your kind of comments link really well into our next discussion, which is about Maestro Artists. So, pandemic, lots of uncertainty, even for yourself in the fest world, in the fixed contract world. Of course, the theatre land has just been completely disrupted. So there's been time to think outside of what we do in the day to day, and I guess you've been finding yourself doing a bit more of that.
Yeah, well, sort of as an experiment and also as a bit of an investment in myself and hopefully in the future and in my friends. Yeah, I saw the pandemic hit and all my friends like you, people who are super talented, have all these skill sets and are super motivated, um, lose work. And what I knew was that I knew all these people. They're working, they have these skills, but what they often have is a lot of free time. And since they're hardworking, I know that they want to capitalize on that free time and get some extra money and also share their knowledge because they have it. And there are a lot of singers like you who maybe can't go into the academic realm because you're busy singing so often. So you're working for a few months and then you're off for a few months, working for a few weeks, off for a few weeks. And
Yeah.
so I saw this group of people and I saw, well, I was thinking of myself clearly and thought, man, as a student back at Penn State, I was just dying for the resource that I was lucky to find in Graham. He happened to be right there. But what would I have done if I hadn't had that? I would have to move, try to find someone who was a match as a teacher. And I really lucked out that I had a teacher that, well, we just jived in terms of interest, how we saw singing, how we wanted to go about things. So I thought if we could link up students with teachers like this online, because with the pandemic, people are becoming more and more comfortable with online learning, that would be great. And so I kind of workshopped it with my brother-in-law, Joseph Helinski, who's also a singer and a teacher, has a successful studio, and with Graham, and we talked about it and tried to think of what we could come up with. And we came up with Maestro Artists. Check it out, maestroartist.biz. And the idea basically is that you can, instead of what most online platforms for learning do, they usually do it by location. So you would go online and you would type in your zip code and it would show a radius of, whatever, 10 miles. Say these are the teachers within 10 miles. But when has a music teacher ever been, what does it matter that they're close to you? What matters is how you match with them and how you guys work together. And, if you're a guy, maybe it's more useful to have a male teacher to show you how to get into head voice. If you're a female, maybe it's easier to have a female, whatever. If you're a tenor, you want someone who sings the same rep. So I thought instead of doing it by location, let's kind of sort it by interest. So we designed it so that we could have all these teachers on here and you could kind of categorize them and search. Think like if you're going to book hotels, you could book a hotel that has a pool or inclusive Wi-Fi or a free breakfast or something like that. And as a teacher, you can add all these tags. You could say Josh Mills, tenor, whatever diction you wanted to teach, English diction, German diction, because he lived in Austria and Germany. You could add public speaking on there. And then students could go on and select these tabs and it would filter it out. And then they would say, oh, Josh is the perfect match for me. And then you could book a
Yeah.
lesson with Josh.
Fantastic. So it's really the key of it is changing the way in which we perceive teaching. So it's not location based. It's available based on your requirements of what you're particularly wanting to to improve, and putting in touch. One thing that we spoke about when you were first starting the idea is that you said there are loads of people in your childhood or your area in the States that they want the best for their kids. They want top quality education. What a great chance to have one platform where you have really highly skilled professional people that are willing to give their time. But importantly as well, you understanding how a singer's brain works and understanding that there's flexibility within that you need in the career. So in the pandemic, I was reluctant to go into another job for a short period because I had upcoming contracts, which were all cancelled, unfortunately. But I didn't know that at the time. So planning is difficult, but you've set it up in such a way that you can alter your diary, fit it around the schedule, and that really works well for both teacher and student. So I think that's such a great plan. Going back, sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
thank you. No, we tried to make it as flexible, because I'm a singer, I know how important that is
Yeah.
for singers. So the scheduling, all this stuff takes place online. You're basically just booking online. You pay via PayPal. But the singers control their schedule, they control what they teach, they control their prices. Um, and so if you went on a gig and you wanted to block yourself off for a month because you had a gig, you could totally do that. That's no problem. Also, we provide the Zoom link automatically for you to teach online. But if you found something that worked better for you and you wanted to do that, that's totally up to you. If the person happened to be in your neighborhood and you wanted to meet in person, you could also meet in person. That's totally up to you. So the freedom's really there. All we're doing is providing the connection and the booking and the payment online.
Sorry, man, I didn't unmute myself.
I missed your
Oh
brilliant
no.
question.
I was going to say, walk us through the process of starting a company, because there's a massive journey that starts between having an idea and making it happen. And you've been so diligent with making that kind of dream or thought a reality. How have you gone about doing that?
Well, I watched my parents do it, and they're both doctors, and they started a company. They were inventing medical devices and started one and sold it, and were very successful with that. So I watched them do it, and people who hadn't gone to business school, but just kind of had common sense and some, they knew who to talk to in order to outsource what they needed. And so I watched them do it successfully and just kind of learn their way through it. And so I was inspired by that, but I was sad that I never had the good idea. I was watching them come up with good ideas all the time, and I thought, oh man, well, I don't have a good idea. So I have to say that I was listening to my brother-in-law speaking with my father about this, and I just kind of saw that raw idea and turned it
Mm.
into this. So I still didn't even come up with the idea in a sense, just kind of fashioned it into what it is now. But so I was always inspired by watching them do that in their entrepreneurial spirit, and so consequently, I workshopped it with my dad over the summer vacation. We were driving in the car talking about what we should do, and he said, "Okay, well, first thing you should do is you should watch this YouTube video by Simon Sinek, I think is his name, and it's a TED
Mm.
Talk, and there are a bajillion TED Talks now, but it's called Start with Why." And his idea is basically trying to figure out why it is that you're starting the company. And if it's to make $1 million, that's not a good reason, and that's not going to be a successful company. Which is always my joke. If you want to make $1 million, you just write a book called How to Make $1 Million. You'll sell it immediately. But so I started with
That's
that and tried to think about why why I wanted to start the company. And I thought, for the reasons that we sort of talked about earlier, is that I think people deserve a say in their education, freedom in this, and to have all the resources available to them. If you live in New York, you have all of this available to you. You have all the singers and teachers available. But if you live out in the middle of nowhere, you might not. And I think it's unfair that those people don't have a say and are kind of at a disadvantage. So I thought giving people the freedom to choose their education and with whom they learn was important. So I started with that. And then I just went onto the Small Business Administration.gov website and found a template for a business plan and just started filling in my own version of it. I think the template is like they're starting a wooden toy shop or something like that. I was like, okay, well, that has nothing to do with what I want. What's an executive summary? But I just started, typing in raw sentences of what it is, and it eventually became some semblance of a business plan. I found out later that that's exactly what my parents had done too. They just went to the same website and typed in the exact same template, coincidentally. And then I
No way.
talked to some more friends about it. I talked to a friend who was a lawyer and a patent attorney to ask him if there was any intellectual property we had, and he said no, really, because it's the whole concept is selling connections. It's the oldest business in the world, really. Pimping your friends out, and so there is you can't own that. But talking to him about that, talking to a friend of mine who works in marketing, because I have no knowledge about marketing, and she said, okay, this sounds like a good idea. You should do this and this and this. And then I talked to a person who was good at technology, and he said, okay, you should do this and this and this. And I said, okay, how much does that cost? And he said, it'll cost you $4,000. I said, oh, that sounds pretty cheap. So I ran it by Graham and Joseph, and they said, oh, yeah, that sounds cheap. Let's hop on a call with him. And when we hopped on a call, he said, okay, yeah, I've actually calculated it, and it's going to cost you $8,000. It's like, what? What are you talking? Do you just double it because you just realized it might be a good idea? It's like, no, I would like to be able to beautify my house or something like that. So I immediately hopped off that phone call and was like, okay, I'll buy the guy a succulent or something, but it's not worth doubling the price. So veered away from that guy. And eventually Graham actually wound up designing the site and just kind of learning online how to use WordPress and some plugins, and we just kind of
Wow.
stumbled our way forward on that. But yeah, talking to different people, and if people said this was a bad idea, then I took that to heart and tried to figure out why it might be a bad idea. But very few people
Yeah.
said that. Most people said it was a really good one, and just kind of following their advice, because I didn't know anything about it. And I'm sure I've made a bunch of mistakes, but I kind of just viewed them all as a learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's been a huge journey from the idea to making it happen. I think it's so good as well that you collaborate with other people. So it's a joint venture. I think that helps in terms of preparation, motivation, keeping each other accountable. I can relate to that because I'm doing my own personal pursuits, and you have the ups and the downs. And but I think that other people involved, it helps really give momentum and also different perspectives and ideas. So that's fantastic. And now you've arrived at launch day. March 1st is when we're recording this. Don't know when the episode is going to go out, but um, so tell us about launch day. What is happening? What are your hopes and dreams?
Well, launch day, the first hope is that it works, which which it will, and it is. And we've already got a bunch of teachers, including yourself up there, myself included, teaching a variety of different things, voice lessons from beginner to advanced, so to professional. So if you were even making a living singing, we've got that. We've got diction lessons, so English, Italian, French, German. We have a cool setup where you can review audio and video recordings. So if you wanted to submit recordings for auditions for college or for a competition or for a young artist program, and you really just wanted to get some feedback, you could upload up to 3 videos and select which teacher you would want to kind of review that and schedule a meeting with you and talk through it, have some recommendations, just get some feedback. We have audition preparation up there. We have public speaking and confidence coaching up there. We have acting for singers. So there's kind of a resource for everyone. And my hopes are that that's what it is, that it's a resource for both parties, for teachers, for singers, my friends who are highly motivated, highly skilled, and have time and talent, to give them a way to share that, and for the people who are in search of those resources, that they can find them easily and benefit from them.
Amazing. I love that. Fantastic. And particularly what you said about, I'm in London and I've lived in other big cities when traveling and working as a singer, and you're surrounded by people that are very highly skilled and highly trained. But when you go to the middle of nowhere, you have to travel some distance to get that training. So I think it's really fantastic that you're presenting all of these very highly skilled, highly trained people in one place, and I think it's a fantastic idea. It really, really is. Now, there must have been, you mentioned lessons learned, mistakes, that kind of stuff. What tips would you give listeners if they're thinking about starting their own venture? Anything that you've learned?
Yeah, I think I'd even written some down because I'm, well, yeah, that this too, that the learning curve is steep. And so in the beginning, you don't necessarily know the language. And I found this was actually the same when I moved to Germany, and I don't know if it was the same for you, but I kind of had prepared myself. I knew that because I didn't know the language and was a foreigner, that I would kind of get ripped off a little bit on certain things, that I would overpay for a phone contract, or I wouldn't have negotiated properly for paying rent or something like that. I might be out a couple $100 or maybe even a couple thousand. But I told myself beforehand, that's kind of just the cost of being new and learning. And so I told myself the same thing with this, which is, okay, this is what I hope to pay, and hopefully less than that for the whole thing. But if I, wind up testing something and it doesn't work, I'm not going to sweat it. That was part of the plan. You kind of just prepare for it beforehand, so that when it happens, you don't say, oh man, I wasted a couple $100 on this service or this plugin or this, DocuSign trial or whatever, and it didn't work out. I'm such a moron. No, that's part of the learning curve, and you're learning how to speak the language, so that later on, if you turn it over to someone or need to, like right now, Graham's running the website, but at some point we would like to hand it off to someone to really customize it for us. But now we know the language of it, so we can actually tell them what we would want, rather than just coming in as newbies and saying, oh, just make it pretty, and then we could get, wind up paying more than we need to. So taking the time to learn the language and being okay with some breakage along the way, I think, is important.
It's really wise. And when you're creating a business, I mean, I had an experience of this. I had this idea, and then I thought, right, I'm going to build a website. And then suddenly the web designer was saying, so what do you want to put on the About Me page? What do you want to put on the products page? And I was just like, I realized that I didn't have like clear enough vision. And then suddenly you had someone pressing you saying, I need to build this. Give me something. And it kind of, but you don't know that until you've done it and you've experienced it. So I can completely understand your perspective there. And I think starting an idea and having the impetus to actually begin is probably the biggest step that you need to make. And then the next biggest step is actually keeping it going and investing your time and money often into the idea. And that's, I think those are the two kind of hurdles where people first kind of stumble.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And the way I did this was I viewed this as kind of my investment. So I have my standard, mutual funds investment. That's my retirement. And then I had also added, for fun, a trading account that I don't do anything risky with, but just try to see if I can beat my standard American funds.
Yeah.
And instead of tossing some cash into there this year, I said, okay, I'll just delegate that into the Maestro Artists pile, and that will be my sort of riskier bet. So I was prepared for that. And to go back to what you're saying about having to type everything out for the About Me page, I also thought that I was going to get stuck on something like that. But then I went back to the business plan that I had written months prior, that I thought, oh man, this is just a silly exercise. And all I had to do was just copy and paste a bunch of it. So it's a little painful to do and a little tedious, but it kind of, you can go back to it and it reminds you of what your goals are.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that. That's I mean, that goes to show that having other people's inputs and people that have been through it is very important. So for me, it was a very kind of solitary pursuit. I just had an idea and I was like, right, this is what I want to try. And I was figuring things out as I was going. And that's the difference, that you have two other people on the team that you can brainstorm with, and experience from your parents as well. I mean, that's starting with the business plan. Such a great idea, because it just solidifies everything that you want to do. I mean, I wish I knew that, but it's a year too late.
Write everything down, just I wrote everything down whenever it popped into my head. And I think I'll add one last thing, which was to kind of check your ego. As musicians and to be singers, you have to have a little bit of arrogance. I would call it confidence, to be able to stand on stage and to put yourself out there. Consequently, it can be hard to put that away when you're building a business. But we talked about it early on and said, okay, if you're opening a burger shop and you're selling burgers and fries, but you have a vending machine in the corner that sells ice cream cones, and you realize after opening that everyone's buying the ice cream cones and no one's buying your burgers and fries, you have to be willing to say, okay, we're an ice cream shop. So I think having that flexibility and kind of checking the ego at the door. And not, so, for Maestro Artists, we're selling all these different things, all these different skill sets that the teachers are offering. If something becomes really popular, we'll market that harder. I'm not sold on any of it. It's a business. I'm here to sell things, not to make myself feel good.
Yeah. It's a really, really good point to make, isn't it? That you have skin in the game, but you have to be rational and take a step back and really think through things very carefully. And ego definitely plays its part, doesn't it? Because you all want your idea to be successful and to work out. But it's it's not a straightforward process. It's definitely a journey, and a very exciting one. It's not the first day, but the first day of the launch. Who knows where it's going to happen, where it's going to lead. So I'm so privileged and honored that I get to grill you on this momentous occasion. And I'm going to start wrapping up the podcast now, but I always ask folks the same questions at the conclusion. And it's, can you name an embarrassing financial purchase or memory?
I thought about this for about 30 seconds, and then it became very clear which one it was. And for those of you who are listening and not also watching, I have no hair on my head, but I'm quite a hairy dude. And back when I was in Berlin, I had wanted to impress a girl I was dating, and so I thought, okay, what better to impress her than have a freshly shaved back and shoulders? And so I went online and looked up back razors, and there were all these fancy ones that were electronic and had, extending arms and stuff like this. But those were like 60, 70, 80 euro, and I didn't want to spend that much money on it. So I went cheap, and I spent like $10 on this back rake. And what it wound up being was it wasn't electric at all. It was literally, I don't know if you've ever been to a car wash, but or the gas station when they kind of use the wiper on your windshield. It was like that. It was just a serrated edge. And so I was in the shower scraping my back, and it was working until I realized that I had completely massacred myself, and the whole floor of the bathroom was covered in blood, and it wasn't it wasn't a pretty sight. I healed, no problem, but that was something I should not have saved money on. I should have splurged on the $60 electric one instead. But I went cheap with the back rake.
Oh man, that's absolutely golden. That made me cry a little bit. Amazing. Oh god. And can you recommend any either personal finance resources or maybe business resources that you found useful so far?
Well, if you're starting out and you're in the States, the Small Business Administration.gov thing for that template that I was saying. Mm-hmm. In terms of investing, I'm a fake it till you make it kind of guy, especially as a singer. I think that's important. So I've learned the art of telling people that I understand what's going on without really knowing what's going on and convincing them that I do. So I benefited greatly from resources like Investopedia, where, okay, someone's talking to me and telling me all these terms, rate of return and stuff, or the rule of 72. And I'm going, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But it really isn't. So the fact that I could type it in there and there would be a definition and an explanation and links further to it, I thought that was really useful. And the final thing would be just to type online for a future value calculator and play around with it. It's not real money. You're just making up the numbers in your head, and you can make up the rate of return you want and how much money you're starting out with and how much money you're adding, and figure out when you want to retire, plug in that number, and you can just see what you're missing out on if you haven't been investing and what you should get into. So I think just playing around with those numbers, it can be really fun, and you see the difference of a percent. So if you're sticking all your money in a bank account or in, I don't know, gold or bonds or something like that, you'll see what the difference of a percentage point does over 30, 40, even 20 years. It can be millions.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge, and I completely agree. That was kind of the thing that really solidified my mentality about or approach to investing, why I began investing, because I was like, well, I want to make this a reality, and you see how that money, how that investment can compound over time. It's just so convincing. And similarly to you, you have your vision, your business plan, and my plan for this podcast, for these discussions, is to help people discover that this investing thing, this personal finance world exists, and it's worth discussing. And it's not going to be an easy journey, I fear, but what a great privilege to have someone that's a professional musician, gigging, starting, maximizing all of the resources that you have. And I think we learn a lot from everything you've said today, John. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man.
Thanks, Josh. It's been a
pleasure.
Man.
Bye.